Okay, so let's delve into, people aren't going to know this. So you were competing at extremely high level on the athletic front. And, I've worked with some stellar athletes as a clinician, and I've worked with lots of people who were at the top of their game professionally, let's say. And usually what that takes on the professional front is something like, well, extreme ability, extreme native ability in whatever area happens to be under consideration, and then dedication that goes above and beyond the norm. And so the typical great scientist, for example, is absolutely 100% obsessed with what they do. It's a 16-hour day job, essentially 7 days a week, generally for decades. It's the only way that you get to the top of a profession, let's say, or an endeavor that has any degree of rank order by merit and competitiveness, right? You have to be as able as anyone else or more able, but then you have to be dedicated beyond, well, far beyond the norm, because otherwise you're not going to be at the top. So when did you start swimming, and what did you have to do on the discipline front? And also, I suppose, what sacrifices did your family make to make that possible so that you could compete at this level?
So I started swimming when I was 4 years old. I am 22, so I've dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport. By the time I was 8 years old, that's when I transitioned to swimming year round. So this meant that in second grade, you're swimming 2 hours every single day. And it really only gets harder from there, because by the time you get to middle school and high school, you're practicing before school. Then you go straight to school, and straight from school, you go back to practice. After practice, you go home, you eat your dinner, you do your homework, you ice your shoulder, you go to bed, but you wake up and do it all again the next day. And I love what you said about being willing. No one forced us to do this, but we knew that's what you had to do to compete at that top level. I was very blessed.
Why in the world did you do it? I mean, there's a lot. Well, first of all, it's a very focal application of time and energy over a very long period of time, right? And you could argue that, well, there's many things to do in life, and why concentrate so obsessively on that single thing? What was it about your family, your situation, your psychology, or your ability that made this attractive to you? Why did you spend so much time and energy on this?
I think a couple things. I come from a family of athletes. My dad, he was an SEC football player and went on to play in the NFL. All of my uncles they played in the NFL for 10 plus years. They've won Super Bowls, done really incredible things. My youngest brother, he's in college playing football. My mom, she was a Division I softball player. So I think sports is something that I've always been almost infatuated by. And it's weird because swimming, of course, there's not necessarily a good word to describe it other than it's treacherous. It's miserable, but in the best way. So it is an interesting dynamic. It is truly this love-hate relationship. You love the team. I love setting goals. I love achieving goals. I loved winning. And in a sense, I loved practicing. Of course, it's painful. It's hard. You wake up at 5 a.m. to go swim 3 hours right before you go to class all day. There's a lot of, I'll say, negatives that go into competing and training at this level, but the positives, they outweigh the negatives tenfold. There's no better feeling than achieving your goal, winning. I think I'm this person who's driven, I'm competitive, and I think a lot of that stems from my family, from growing up with 3 siblings. We were always on each other's backs, but it's a blessing. I'm very fortunate for really how I grew up and how my parents raised me.
Okay, so there was a lot of value in your family placed on athletic accomplishment, but then also on, you talked about 2 fundamental sources of motivation. And I would say both of those sources of motivation have come under heavy criticism in recent years. The pleasure that you take, let's say, in achieving goals, that's associated with ambition. And as our culture has been torn apart by this current state of ideological idiocy, people have done everything they can to identify ambition, or let's say that desire for achievement, both with ambition and with dominance and with power. And then you also make a case for enjoying winning, and there are movements in the education field that have been, bandied about probably for a century, but particularly since the 1960s, predicated on the insistence that all competition is intrinsically wrong and that any endeavor that requires the victory of one and the defeat of many, let's say, which is typically the case, is somehow inappropriate and maybe even at its base immoral. And I suppose that critique can be extended to the whole free market enterprise, where there are clear winners and losers in different domains. So why do you think, and why has this been true for you personally, why do you think that it's a valid ethical endeavor to be ambitious and to attempt to achieve these high order goals? And why is it, do you think, that it's appropriate to take pleasure in both competition and competitive victory?
I don't look as ambition as something that's selfish. I have had my fair share. Of course, I am an ambitious person. Again, I like to achieve my goals, but there are many times where I've fallen short of achieving my goals. So it sounds as if, you're doing this to win, to compete at that high level and whatever that looks like. But I take value in not achieving my goals. How can we build from that? How can we continue to use your failures, your shortcomings as a way to continue building up? So as much as I do take value in winning, I think there's a certain aspect to losing that is also beneficial and has really thrusted me into the position that I'm in. It's given me the confidence to do what I'm doing, the leadership, the security to take the arrows that I've been taking. And so I think it's a balance. Being ambitious, of course.
That's a really good point, on the resilience front, because one of the things that people need to do to develop in their lives